Linda, I don't know if that's social distancing or I'm not even going to say it. Maybe I should. A gentleman from Desmond, I apologize. I was scheduled to meet with you guys Thursday, and my office finally opened back up, so I was drawn back to work and shortened my schedule a lot. So
Fair enough. Well, we'll give you a rain check.
all right, that's fair.
And I need one too.
Got it.
All right, so we're only waiting at this point on Lucine. We'll give her just a few minutes, and then we'll get started. Oh, she is here. I don't know where she's at here, but you're here. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, I believe we have everybody on board. We're going to get started. And the first item this evening, the parking study results with Desmond. And I don't know who's going to lead off this discussion, but we'll turn the floor over.
I'll start, Mr. President.
Okay, Jamal.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Today we will have a short presentation made by Desmond Design. Desmond is the company actually who we retained back in mid-April with your approval for the parking study. The parking study and the request for proposal addresses several things that we are trying to integrate these components with the Downtown Plus study. So today's presentation will focus on the public garages that we have. It will focus on street parking and off-street parking. We'll also talk about the congestions and the double parking, some of the issues that you actually have been addressing in the past a few weeks, such as the intersections, the clear side triangles, all of these that will be discussed today. Desmond will probably provide you, if you have had a chance to review their presentation, will provide you with some suggestions of what can be done. Please keep in mind that these are all suggestions at this point in time. As you've heard, Desmond is trying to reach out to all city councils to meet with them in order to get a feedback from that. Thank you, Donna, for meeting with them, as well as Melissa and Strat. Thank you for your valuable time. We look forward to meeting with Jeff, as well as Marcia and Johannes Peters. So your input is very, very critical and very important for us. And we would like to make sure that we integrate everything that we discuss. But please keep in mind that some of the suggestions that you are going to hear today are only suggestions, because we are trying to find solutions to a problem in some areas that are heavily trafficked, and in some other areas that how we will be able to provide a smoother traffic flow for the developed downtown area when it's all completed. Without any further ado, I will introduce you to what I consider now my good friends, Jerry Salzman and Greg Schuma, who they are the project managers, and they've been with us every step of the way to lead this presentation. Thank you for your time.
Fair enough. Thank you, Jamal. And Greg, are you able to control the PowerPoint?
I am. I believe I am.
If we can do that, then that might work the best. So Greg and I are very pleased to be here. We've spent some time in Reading, and in the last couple of months, we've been organizing a vast amount of data related to parking. And today we were hoping to give you a brief, and hopefully very brief, sort of a sample of our findings and talk about the process we've gone through so far, and more importantly, where we're going and some ideas about how to get there. So that said, moving along, Greg and I, as you know, have been really largely involved in the study. Moving to the third slide, our scope of work.
Just 1 minute, Jerry, I'm trying to
Oh.
get this slide.
Sorry.
Are we, let me get the slide moving. Okay, I guess this is it. The other must have been the presentation that was handed out.
Oh.
Get the right screen captured here.
Do you have the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, but I think that the clerk may have pulled up the handout that was
Yeah,
given.
exactly. I think they gave you the PDF. Probably if you can switch to the
Okay.
No,
PowerPoint.
I didn't post anything.
Okay.
No, we're talking about the PDF that what Greg is referring to here is the PDF file that's been used in there, but they also have a PowerPoint that mirrors this one, but it's easier to go back and forth.
Okay. I think this is it here. Okay, can everyone see this? Let's see it. Can you see the slide
Yeah,
presentation?
I can see
Jim?
it. I can see it.
Okay, let's see if it's working then.
Let's go to the third one, if you can, if it's working.
Doesn't seem like it wants to move
At the
here.
bottom, it says,
Wait a minute. Oh, this is wrong. Let me close this. I got the wrong file.
Well-
open for some reason, it just. Give me a break here. I know, that's what I'm trying to get to. Let's see. Excuse me for a second here.
I'm sorry, usually our technology is better than this, and I will tell you that when we collected data using drones, the technology worked much better. Not one crash,
Agree.
Why is this not? Yes, I don't know.
but anyway, if you,
Let's see, okay, share screen. Which one am I, or why am I not getting this? This is what's showing right here.
okay,
Still not scrolling. That's not it. It's a city file, office file.
Do you want to try to unshare your screen and then reshare?
Okay. Screen 1, screen 2. Okay. Oh, I see what I'm doing wrong here. It's still not working here. Can't
Would you like to share from my end? Maybe that will help.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me do that. Can you stop sharing, please?
yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now you get,
It says you cannot share, so Linda, would you please give me permission to share?
You have permission to share.
Okay. All right. All right, so do you see this one here?
yes.
Okay, is this, all right, now my screen.
Okay,
can-
perfect. Okay.
Let me
So
know.
let's go move up a couple to where it says scope of work, and I'll tell you about what our study is
This
including.
I
Is this
stand.
here?
There, perfect. So the scope has 4 parts to it. There's a part, parking demand and supply. There's a public participation component, which you'll hear more about in a few minutes. The review of the current parking policies and programs and regulations. And then finally, sort of developing a comprehensive parking plan with recommendations and implementation strategy. So the study area, there are 4 study areas, as you know. Jamal, you can go to the next slide. The downtown covers most of the recognized downtown, from Walnut to basically Franklin and from east to west. And we're going to talk a lot about the conditions there. The the conditions in the 3 other neighborhood areas are significantly different than downtown, and the challenges are, as you know, remarkably different. The northwest area is the area west of 6th Street, and the northeast area is east of 8th Street. And the south area is basically everything south of Franklin Street to the river. Each one is a little different, but there's a lot of common themes in the neighborhoods. And I know that you all have heard from your constituents a lot and have experienced the issues firsthand. We'll talk some about that in a minute. But the big issue as we approached this study was, how do we deal with the situation in light of COVID? It sort of has disrupted everybody's, operation. People weren't working at offices, they were at home, so parking data was different. So what we did was we looked back at historical information pre-COVID and compared it with the current, and gave a sort of a sense of where things might have been or would have been without COVID. We conducted stakeholder interviews, which for us is very important for a variety of reasons. One is to find out what the problems we might have missed in not seeing them under current conditions, but also to hear from people what stakeholders perceive as the issues. We spent a fair amount of time in the field confirming the existing parking facilities and the on-street regulations, observing the occupancies at peak times, and just generally noting how the system is working. And lastly, in order to facilitate capturing a record of occupancies, we engaged a drone photography firm to basically film all of the on-street areas in the neighborhoods and downtown, and gives us a record of the conditions at that moment in time. Greg is going to show you a little bit about that in a minute. After he begins to tell you about the stakeholder interviews and the feedback we've received so far, we're still reaching out to a few remaining stakeholders, but that will help us drive a lot of the work. So Greg can tell you about that, and then show you some of the results.
Okay, if you could move the slide forward. One more.
One more.
Okay. We talked to about 40 communities, constituents, cross-section of the community. A lot of them representing various institutions. This list was provided to us by the city, and we got a lot of good feedback. You can imagine the comments varied by their respective point of view, but some of the main themes were that some of the parking facilities were not perceived, the garages were not perceived as being safe and secure during off hours. A lot of people just found the on-street parking far more convenient. Rates, there was some issues with rates, particularly during special event times, that they thought there could be a better strategy for pricing during large events. There's everyone seemed to be frustrated with the prevalence of illegal parking in various areas of the city, double parking, and even in loading zones and so forth. Some suggested maybe the ground floor of the garages be more accessible to transient parkers, so that people using the garages don't really have to go up around and around in the upper levels of the garage to find the parking space. Commonly, most parking facilities the lower spaces are reserved for monthly parkers. There was, the developers had issues with some of the zoning issues, and we'll be trying to focus on some of those ideas and problems later on. You can go to the next slide. We spent time talking not only with city staff about the zoning issues at length. We also had firsthand presentation of the parking authority's five-year strategic plan, and found that the plan was sound, and it seemed like they were had an ambitious strategy to address a host of needs and problems. Some of them being the citywide initiative for parking relief, particularly in the neighborhood areas, by seeking to acquire various lots and create parking lots. Some of those lots might turn out to be permanent improvements that serve the community. Others might, over time, transition to new development sites. Expansion of enforcement is, I know that they're working on that, and extending meter times till evening hours. So all in all, our dealings with the authority have been good, and we were quite impressed with their initiative to move out and work on a number of different fronts. They certainly recognize their role in the community and the value that they can add, and the importance of connecting with other civic organizations and entities to try to make parking a more compatible and useful utility to all involved, particularly the residents. Can you go to the next slide? This are the areas really, the amount of study area that we were faced with dealing with was almost 3 square miles, 1,600 acres. And so our use of drones turned out to be the only way we could really get a true assessment of what was happening, particularly in those areas outside of downtown. You realize the density in these neighborhoods. And so we had these areas flown over time. In the neighborhoods, we basically recognized, and that's not correct, but it says noon to 2, but on weekdays, we had the drones fly from 6 p.m. to 7, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., knowing that that's when most residents would be in their homes. And so we wanted to see the density of cars parked on street and also off street. And in downtown, the focus was more on the noon hour, between noon and 2 o'clock. So we flew these areas twice, each area twice, once on a weekday and once on a Saturday. All the flights on Saturday were between noon and 2 p.m. because even in the neighborhoods, we wanted to see what happens when people start to move around. They're not home for dinner, and just to see if there was any loosening or lessening of on-street parking demand during midday hours in the neighborhood. Downtown, the midday hours is normally the busiest time, weekend and weekday. I would suggest that you all take that link that was in the that's shown here, and you could get a close-up. These images are great. They were all flown at 400 feet elevation, so you can zoom in and see a lot of issues, and we are going to talk about some of the things that they revealed. Demand for on-street parking in downtown is very strong and extremely high in the neighborhoods. There's really virtually just not anywhere for people to park in the neighborhoods. And the aerials evidence the fact that numerous places where private property owners have either taken on an initiative to park on vacant and unimproved lots, or they found a way to somehow create a parking pad at the rear of their lot off the alleys and so forth. And that's all evident from the aerials. The problem is that what's being done is there's not a lot of order and organization to it. And that's where we think that the city can help to guide owners and facilitate some of those private property owners initiatives to improve their parking situation. Can we go to the next slide? You might as well skip that one and go to the next slide to talk about utilization. The meter system is mostly limited to the downtown area. We've got about 700 meters on street, and majority of those meters are 1 or 2 hour meters. The thing about downtowns is that while short-term parking is desired, you want turnover, there's a debate that maybe you don't impose time limits on parking, but you allow the price of parking to climb as people stay longer and longer in those same spaces. It generates more revenue. It doesn't force people to have to move their car from one place to the other just to avoid the 1 hour time limit. And if they choose to stay all day, that becomes quite costly at the prevailing rate. So one of those things we're going to look at is that whether the time limits are all necessary, the current time limits are appropriate and necessary throughout downtown, or there are ways to recalibrate the time limits on street. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, there we go. There are, I think you jumped over one. I think we had yeah, that's the one. This slide simply just showing the utilization downtown, a little bit stronger on Saturdays, about 70% or over 70% utilization throughout downtown. Clearly the greatest demand is sort of north and west of Penn and 5th Street. And that makes sense where all the courts, office buildings, City Hall, and so forth are located. And that's where you saw mostly a concentrated utilization. Next slide. Besides the parking authority, the garage and lots that are under the control of the parking authority, there's a wealth of privately owned parking lots throughout downtown. And together, this huge supply of parking, over 9,000 spaces in 61 facilities, they have a tremendous impact on how downtown is perceived. And from a design and planning standpoint, we think that it might be worthwhile for the city to consider stepping in and imposing some controls over the private parking lots and off-street lots. One, to improve their appearance and impose requirements for at least a minimal amount of ID signage that helps to distinguish them from the public parking facilities that are under the control of the authority. These kind of sort of signage and landscaping and street frontage improvements will, as a whole, really change the way the downtown looks. Next slide. The signage for the parking authority really needs to be addressed. I know that that's on the agenda for the parking authority as it stands right now. While there's a branding for the authority, this orange and blue signage and logo for the authority, it's not consistently apparent at all of the garages. And then the wayfinding really needs to be improved. The side to the right, or the image to the right, happens to be some of the branding that other parking authorities, this happens to be particularly Toronto's system of parking, where they have a website, pay by phone, all their, even their bicycles. Today, scooters are starting to be common. I don't know if that's ever going to be something that the city of Reading wants to pursue, but the signage and branding is important, and it can bring order and organization and certainly help guide people to the off-street parking facilities that are so plentiful in downtown. Next slide. There's a general disregard for parking regulations. Some of these problems persist because it's just habitual over time. But there are, and then of course, the lack of supply, on-street parking supply, particularly in the neighborhoods, drives some of these behaviors. But double parking is rampant. And that, right, this happens to be right on Penn Avenue, right, right downtown, where you got trucks and cars blocking in, angled cars. What we saw in downtown and other parts of this area downtown and other parts of downtown, the double parking seems to be associated with the lack of areas for short-term drop-off and pickup, delivery, and so on. And if I know that there was legislation passed that would provide recently in the spring for fees to be charged, both individual fees and fleet fees to be charged at loading zones. But that program really needs to, we're just learning a little bit more about it. We're trying to gather some information about how it's working or what stage it's in. But ultimately, I think that some of the double parking can be minimized if those loading zones are more pronounced in their appearance and are enforced to a greater degree. Next slide. This slide basically is showing the parking facilities that are the garages and lots of the authority and the utilization. We touched on peak utilization. The point I would say is that we did look at historical revenue numbers for the parking authority, and based on the individual sales of permits and transient parking at each of the facilities dating back to 2019 pre-COVID, it's our assessment that those parking facilities were not heavily utilized or not fully utilized even prior to COVID. And of course, right now, these numbers reflect that the city and the parking authority are really suffering behind the effects of COVID still. Next slide. This just shows some of the availability of off-street parking, while, as I said, on-street parking is pretty. The demand for on-street parking is pretty high. Next slide. We're working on the existing addition summary that we're preparing. And the next phase would be to start to understand what are the circumstances that may change the demand in the future. These are some development projects that were identified as having high probability of going forward. We're trying to analyze them and gather details about them, and we'll put together a summary that begins to quantify how these developments and any others are going to impact parking demand, particularly in the downtown area. Next slide. As I said, there's a lot of, this happens to be a picture of from the aerials, the drone aerials that we took This was from the Northwest neighborhood. And you can see that from the slide, the property owners, many of whom have built garages off the alleys, but we found that the alley access wasn't always consistent from block to block. Some alleys were well paved and improved, others were filled with potholes and so forth. And so the ability to get to the rear of these residential properties, if something can be done to improve access and circulation, then it makes for an opportunity for more and more property owners to create 1 or 2 parking pads at the rear of the lot, whether they're in garages or just a surface paved area. Next slide. This slide is again from the aerials, the drone aerials, and you can see here people parking on crosswalks, at intersections, at fire hydrants, all unsafe conditions, line of sight problems when you're trying to cross an intersection where cars are blocking your view of this oncoming traffic, this loading zone problems and so forth. And this is all evident from those drone aerials that you can access through that web link. Clearly, enforcement is probably the only thing that can be done besides trying to find more off-street parking. I know the authority hopes to expand its enforcement unit and also initiate more mobile enforcement to be able to cover larger areas and with more frequency. The key with enforcement is consistency and consistency and diligence.
Yeah, Greg, excuse me for 1 second. Jamal, how are we doing on time? I didn't.
Jamal, you're on mute.
Sorry, past the 20 minutes, so we can
Okay.
speed it up.
Well, they're just like,
because we'd like to give councilors a chance to ask questions.
Right.
okay. We can go straight to let's move forward to a couple more slides, and we can just talk about our next steps. Go down to the second to last slide.
That one?
No, there's a narrative.
Yeah, what we're skipping are
one
some
right after
ideas
that.
about how to potentially make more spaces in underutilized lots and off of alleys.
Right. The previous slides, which if you've got the handout, you can see that those are indicating the areas where there are opportunities for off-street parking in the neighborhood areas,
Yeah.
which is has to be an area of emphasis going forward. I know that that's what the authority is trying to work on too. The next slide, please. Our next steps in the process is to hold virtual meetings for each of the communities that we're studying, including downtown. The dates we have for these meetings is August 3rd, 4th, 10th, and 11th. We have a web platform that we will conduct a soft launch on, hopefully next week, or later this week, a soft launch where we ask some of the stakeholders to go to the site and offer their comments so that when citizens get a look at it, they'll feel more comfortable adding comments. But the hosted meetings that we plan to have, they'll be held in the evening, more or less. We still need some guidance on the exact time for each neighborhood, but we probably will present the downtown meeting on the 11th, the last meeting. These are 2 dates, Tuesday and Wednesday of the first week of August, and Tuesday and Wednesday of the second week of August. We'll make this presentation, share our findings and some of our information. And the point is we want to inform, educate, and get feedback from anyone who signs up. And also we want to keep that website up so that we can keep the community updated on the progress of the report. We'll be producing existing conditions summary. We'll forecast future parking conditions. As I said, we'll be formulating some policy and programmatic recommendations that we think can help the situation. And then we'll be back to produce and present a final report to City Council and others. Next, we can have questions now.
All right, well, thank you, Greg and Jerry. I'm going to open it up to any council members with any questions at this time.
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Go ahead, Strat, and then Lucy.
Jerry, when I met with you, we talked about a lot of things, but everything that's brought up here tonight comes back to one thing. The city wasn't built for, we'll say, 3,000 cars. It was built for 1,000 cars. That's one thing. Also, you can set up this and set up that. Right now, we are not using our enforcement to handle the double parking, which is this is the worst I've seen it in all the years I lived in Reading. The double parking where they want to, you go and talk to them, they ignore you. I don't think the police officers are doing their job. They're getting disgusted. They're getting disgusted themselves. We must have enforcement when you have regulations, and you can put out all the new regulations you want. If you're not going to enforce the regulations, forget it. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Lucy?
Hi, good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for the presentation. Sorry, I have yet to participate. I know that's on my list of things to do is to connect with you.
You have an opportunity whenever.
Yes,
you want.
thank you. So a couple of things stood out to me and I did write them down. I'm sure we'll talk about them. Changing the meter approach with the time limit is definitely interesting, as well as the alley paving. Some things for us to consider, I guess, in the future. I'm so happy to hear that you are doing the community forums. We'll make certain to get those dates out to constituents to encourage them to participate. But the one thing that really stuck out to me, I wrote down, and I'm paraphrasing you, that the non-compliant parking, the general disregard for the rules is the root cause. So the behavior is the root cause. And I ask you then, is this kind of the chicken or the egg, right? So if you see this behavior and disruption, is it because there's no parking, all rules are broken, or is it, a general non-compliance? And I'm not talking about enforcement. I'm talking kind of about a culture of how we approach this as a city to work with our residents when there's a general disregard. So I think that really stood out to me. Do you have any quick bites on that?
Well, it's an interesting question. And I think it is both the chicken and the egg. In fact, that's the real dilemma. I think in the neighborhoods it is absolutely clear there is not a place to park. And therefore people are sort of almost forced to park any which way they can, even if it's illegal. And because there's not an alternative, that's, you can beat up on people so much, but until you provide them an opportunity to do something different, I don't really see that you can make a big difference. And to that end, I think there is some the authority and is working to try to provide some parking, and I think our ideas about the alley parking will be beneficial. It's a very micro scale kind of improvement, because you improve something in one alley or in one block, it helps there, but it doesn't help in the hundreds of other blocks. So it's a long-term plan. But I think your issue about the disregard, particularly in downtown, is that people get used to disregarding it in the neighborhoods, and they're disregarding it downtown as well. And it's an issue, and it's going to take some time and some enforcement and some education, I think. It's none of these are going to be like magic bullets that suddenly you solve it. There's plenty of parking available. So it's not that in downtown, it's not that you can't solve it, you can't find a place to park. It's that people have chosen not to. And maybe with some enforcement and a change in meter rates, and it will encourage people to get used to parking in garages, which is ultimately the solution. So long-winded answer to a difficult.
Well, thank
question.
you for that. Yeah, we'll continue to focus beyond education and enforcement. What else really can be done to encourage people to be more compliant?
Marcia?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. First of all, gentlemen, your presentation was incredible. You really captured the essence of the parking issues in our city. And I really commend you for that work. And I want to go back to Mr. Marmaru's statement that the city wasn't built for the density of cars that we have. And if you look at large other urban areas such as New York City, Philadelphia, people rely more heavily on public transportation, and there isn't the volume of cars that need spaces to park. So I'm not sure how that adds to the equation, but it appears to me, and I live in one of those neighborhoods in Southeast Reading where there's high density, where people have gone to extremes to create spaces where they can, and have also been getting fined through the authority, which then creates a greater level of frustration. And I know I need to set a meeting up for you to maybe drill into this a little deeper. But how do we change the culture of automobiles? Because that, I think, is the root of this problem, is people are so dependent on their automobiles to get from point A to point B. They're not, as in larger cities, used to public transportation, nor do we have a system designed for that. So then, we sort of keep going around the circle. Where do we put all these cars?
Yeah, you're right. And I don't know that we can solve every problem in this study because these are major sort of, increasing transit to the point where it makes a difference in the auto ownership is a significant effort. But even in big cities like Philadelphia, in the dense parts of the cities, they face many of the same problems. The density of people and cars is greater than the curb front on the on the streets, and that's really the essence of it. So in the short term, the only thing that we're really seeing is finding a way to provide some off-street spaces in underutilized property, either in alleys or in vacant lots. And then in long term, it's a city question as to whether the city is willing to invest in a more robust transit system that is good enough to get people out of their cars.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else?
I see one hand.
Go ahead.
Donna.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you. I appreciate having had the opportunity. I apologize for the phone in the background. I appreciate having had the opportunity to participate to discuss parking concerns throughout the city and in my district. I think, Marcia touched on something that is a part of this whole thing, is that no matter, and with all due respect, you come forward with, unless we change major things in a city, which includes incentivizing deconversion of multi-units into single-family homes,
Yes.
Improved, and the transit system is more of a county and regional level than it is a city level, encouraging small transit trolley kind of buses within the inner cities that have regular stops from maybe some of the garages to neighborhoods, and the routes that would comply with that. And working with neighborhoods for these smaller parking lots that people can use, and making it affordable for them, because I guarantee you, knowing the constituents in my district, and I'm sure all of them, given the option of parking on the street versus paying $20 a month to park in the lot, most are still going to take the chances of parking on the street.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a challenge, and I hope I hope people take advantage of it, but I'm concerned about that. So I think no matter what comes out of this, unless we look at this as a multi-pronged, multifaceted situation that is short-term and long-term, with all due respect, this is going to be another study that's going to sit in a shelf. And I've just, between covering these studies going back to the late 70s through now being on council, I've just, maybe I'm getting too sarcastic, too skeptical, but I am concerned that unless we really look at this through a larger lens, we're just going to be stuck again. So not to be pessimistic, but speaking from experience, it has been something
Yes, indeed.
that is a major concern.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions at this time? All right, if not, we appreciate the update. We look forward to the ongoing development of the plan. And parking is never an easy problem, especially in a crowded city like Reading, but there's solutions that could be found that can make some improvements, and we have to be realistic about them. And we look forward to the ongoing development of the plan.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be back in
Thank
touch.
you.
And anyone who wants to have a discussion with us, any of the counselors, will be more than eager to set it up.
I just want to wrap up and say thank you very much, councilors. Please look at that link that was provided in the presentation, as well as the survey. We'll make it available for you probably by the end of this week. And we would appreciate your input on the survey itself, because that will give us a lot of valuable information on how to interact with our constituents. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to move on with the agenda. And the next item up is an update from PFM. And we're going to welcome the Honorable Gordon Mann with us this evening. Gordon, welcome, sir. The floor is all yours.
Hello, everyone. I've been upgraded to honorable. That's it's very nice of you.
I'm not sure how long it'll last, Gordon, but I'm kidding.
Let me show you what we've got here. All right. So we are now within only a couple of days. Today's July 18th. There's about a year left for the city in Act 47. So the 2019 plan was passed on July 22nd. There's a 3-year period. The plan covers 3 years. So within a year and a couple of weeks, the city hopefully should be done with its time in Act 47 oversight. So we're sort of at the, if you're a hockey fan, the second period intermission. We're through 2 of the 3 years. So I wanted to give folks a sense of what we want to focus on in the final period, what we're working on. And while we can come back and have another conversation about the process once we get closer to it actually going through the rescission and the exit process, give folks some sense of what that looks like for those who don't remember from a couple of years ago. So the first thing is the exit plan had a list of initiatives, and as is always the case, if there's 50 initiatives in the plan, there's a handful, 20, 25 that we're really focused on as high priorities. The last public in-person presentation I gave before the COVID, and still the last one I've given in person, was with you guys back in February of last year, talking about what the high priority initiatives were. And some of those have been checked off in terms of things that we were looking to get accomplished. All of the 4 key positions in administrative services and finance are filled. The city has kept its budget in balance. There's a capital project manager position. I understand that there may be some personnel changes there, or some need to reorganize things in public works, but the position at least is there. Most of the collective bargaining is done, down to one final collective bargaining agreement, the negotiations with AFSCME, and that's on our desk, and we're reviewing that structure right now. Hopefully we'll be able to sign off on that. You do have a multi-year agreement with the parking authority. Heard a lot about the parking over the last half hour. And generally those sorts of things have been accomplished. The things that are left that we would consider our high priorities, some of them again are on our plate, the rank and file negotiations. The first one with the budgeting process that you see there, that's just because we're headed back into the budget. That initiative turns on and off depending on where we are in the process. But the one we really want to focus on over the next year is the one that's in blue there, the CP02, which is the capital budget and the progress reporting. You have had a capital EIT for a number of years. You've got some earned income tax revenue that's built up. This year's revenue will be generally somewhere in the $6 to $7 million range, depending on how COVID impacts things. And then next year you would have 1.5 year of, or I guess a little more than that, 7 months of the commuter tax revenue. And then once you exit, it does go away. It doesn't stay, and it unfortunately doesn't even stay for the rest of the year. It's eliminated. But you will still have your own resident EIT in the capital fund, which generates $3 to $3.5 million. And on top of that, you have the ARPA money, the federal stimulus money. Not all of it will be spent on capital. Not all of it can be spent on capital. And I don't have any insight for folks. I know the administration's working on this, on even what folks are thinking about. But I think it's reasonable to assume that some of the 60+ million will go towards capital projects. I think it's possible for you to use that money, which has some time elements attached to it, where you have to spend it by a certain date, and to take the capital EIT and set it aside and wait till ARPA's done, and then use those dollars out there. So effectively to bank them, or to do both at the same time, right? If you wanted to do, instead of round numbers, $10 million in capital projects, $15 million in capital projects, provided you have the staff and the capacity to execute them, that again is also, I think, permissible. But you have money, you have a list of projects, you have a position for the manager in charge of this, and we know that may not be enough, and it was not written with the understanding that you would be getting $60 million in federal money, with a chunk of that going towards capital. But helping the city get to a point where it's able to execute those capital projects in the capital budget as best as it can is one of our two kind of remaining priorities. And when I say that, the way I would measure success here is two things. When we look at your capital budget, how much of it do you spend in a year? So I think you'll recall a few years ago, when I was in town, I mentioned something to the effect of that a small percentage of the budgeted projects were getting done. So if you look at the budget, again, round numbers is $10 million. Are you spending 4, you're spending 5, you're spending 6, and within individual projects, right? So if you have $2 million set aside for a fire station, how much of that gets spent? And then the other thing, in addition to dollars, is just kind of progress in terms of where projects are. So as non-engineers, we kind of break it down into different phases. There's the not started phase, there's the design phase, there's the contracting phase, there's construction, and then there's closeout. And what we would want to see is, for the high priority projects, of which there are about 20 or so, we would want to see those progress over time, right? So that you move from designing to contracting, and from contracting to construction in those projects. Some of them, if you're just buying a fire truck or whatever, obviously that won't really be relevant. But we want to see the city continue to make progress in those areas. And that's our scoreboard. That's how we're measuring success. How much of the budget do you spend, and where do the projects move from milestone to milestone? And equally as important, do you even have a report that shows that to you, which we've worked with Stan and Jamar and some others on, so that if you say this project's about halfway done, if we look at the dollars that are spent, they line up and they make sense. The second thing is the second priority over the next, the final year or so, is related to how the process works. The way it works, if you recall from a couple of years ago, is sort of the same way. PFM does, instead of a financial condition report, which we did at the beginning of 2019 and said, is the city ready to get out or not? We make a recommendation to the secretary. There really are only two options left anymore. You get out, you successfully exit, which I would expect to be the case, or you start down the path to receivership through fiscal emergency. The legislature last year, in the middle of the pandemic, did give communities the ability to adopt an 18-month extension. That was primarily for places like Scranton, who were right in the middle of exiting when the pandemic hit, and they wanted to give them more of an off-ramp. I don't expect to use that provision here. I don't think it will be necessary. You'll hear this eventually from your auditor, but you're coming off a year where, despite the pandemic, you're going to likely have a financial surplus last year without doing any layoffs. I think that the impact of COVID is far from over. The earned income tax receipts have not been real good for the first half of the year. The real estate transfer tax receipts have been awesome still. But I don't think we've seen the end of the impact. But I don't think you're not Scranton. You're not going to need to stay in oversight for another 18 months to get through to the other side. So what we would do is make the likely recommendation for you to get out, and then the secretary would review that and rule on that. But in making that recommendation, we have to step through the same process we went through the last time. So we have to show that you've met the 4 criteria to get out. The first one is that, deficits have been eliminated. That's primarily been interpreted in terms of the past, that you haven't had deficits leading up to this point, but you haven't. They want to make sure you have all your debt items squared away. That's not an issue for you. They want to make sure that you don't have any major claims or legal judgments against you. That's not an issue for you. And then the last one, the one where we have to spend some time on, is the city is projected to have positive operating balances, so not have deficits, for the first 5 years after termination. So that would run through 2027. That doesn't mean you can never do a tax increase, or that you don't show any kind of red on your books. That wouldn't be true of any city in Pennsylvania. But we do have to be able to say that there's a reasonable probability or a possibility, however you choose to think about that you'll have balanced budgets. And one of the things we'll want to think about in doing that is, one, we do have to do the one more last nitty gritty, super detailed multi-year financial projection, which we'll do. But we also want to talk about how you're going to use the federal stimulus dollars. Some of those I expect, and I'll say I haven't had any, I don't have any insider knowledge on what the administration is thinking about. So take all of this as pretty generic commentary. Some of it you'll use internally to government under the revenue replacement criteria. PFM is actually in the process of doing that calculation, so you know what it is for this year. It's a retrospective thing, so the amount of money you lost in 20 is what you can spend in 21. What you lose in 21 is what you could spend in 22, and so on. But we'll be able to tell you not just what you can spend this year under that revenue replacement criteria, but what we think you'll be able to spend over the next few years, although you'll have to check the numbers and see if reality matches our projections. But more than that, be able to say, the city has this amount of money. It has a chance to do some really transformative things. This is, broadly speaking, where that money would go. This is not a fully lined out plan. This is not something you would vote on and it would be locked in place. This doesn't rise to the level of the Act 47 recovery plan. It's just saying this is our plan, and this is how we, at this point in time, which would probably be late this year, early next year, this is how we're thinking about using that money. So that when we go to the secretary and we say they're ready to come out, we've accounted for that. Again, lots of things will happen between now and 2026, 27, which is the end of that projection period. Lots of things will happen between now and 2024, which, depending on which category you're looking at, is your deadline for spending the federal stimulus money. But we'll want to account for that in a way that you guys see and are comfortable. It'll come from you. It won't come from PFM in terms of what your plans are in broad categories, and to have that multi-year projection so that you have that as a roadmap, because you will have a few other things to think about, and we'll be able to help you think about them up through about July of next year. But there'll be some variables for you guys to think about. You'll have some more flexibility in some areas that you haven't for a while. So, the questions we will try to set you up to think about. Again, you won't be able to answer these and carve them in stone for 5 years, but to start to think about really in next year, the Rescue Plan Act funding, that's the stimulus money, earned income tax rates. So after July of next year, the commuter tax, I think, will go away, but you'll have a decision to make for 2023 and forward on what you want to do with the resident earned income tax. You'll have the 0.3 portion of the tax that goes towards capital. You may choose to leave that there. You may choose to shift some of it back to operations. You may choose to reduce it. So just bring the tax rate down. Depending on how much EIT money and ARPA money you have built up for your capital budget, that'll be something to look at. What's the amount of money that you want as a reserve for capital projects? So that will be one area of flexibility you have that you really haven't since 2010. You'll have all of the utilities. You've heard a lot about the parking system tonight. The lease with the RPA comes up for renewal in 2024, but the RAWA lease comes up in the second half of next year. So right after you do this, the Act 47 process, you'll have the discussions with RAWA. And, we're hopeful, again, no insider knowledge, you folks there probably know more than we do, but we're hopeful that your federal consent decree with the sewer system, could also go away and could lift the cap on that. So you may be able to do some different things to get revenue from your different utility systems. On the other side of things, on the expenditure side of things, you have collective bargainings for 3 of the 4 unions and eventually for the 4th union that will take you through the end of next year, right? So they're plan compliant, they set the salaries, they set the health insurance. But again, right about the time we're preparing for you to get out next year is about the time you would start negotiating, at least with police and fire. You usually start 6 months before the end of their contract. So that's July 1st, you would exit sometime in July of next year. And this will be the first round of negotiations post Act 47, which means, the protections that are in there where the recovery plan says, look, this is the amount of money we have to spend, those protections won't be there anymore. And the last thing is, headcount changes. The recovery plan doesn't specifically limit the amount of cops and firefighters and clerical workers and street staff you have. But the fact that you have collective bargaining agreements which set how much you pay, and then the plan which says the total amount you pay really does box you in terms of headcount changes. So what do you want to change there? Where do you want to invest money? Where do you not want to invest money? What are those decisions you want to make? Again, about the time we release this, we'll be midway through next year and you'll have your 2022 budget. And within a few months of our time wrapping up, you'll be getting ready for the 2023 budget. But some of those variables, which for a long time, you've really only had the ability to think about in terms of what does Act 47 allow, you'll be able to think about in terms of what can we afford and what makes sense. So that's our preview for the third period, for the final year and what we'll be working on. I think you have this presentation. If not, I can send it to you. And I will drop the thing so folks can see.
Thank you, Gordon, for the presentation. A lot of information, a lot of moving parts to get to this point. Some knots to be tied, if you will.
Yeah.
But most of the stars seem to be lined up pretty effectively. Just want to turn it over to the body before I give any comments. Any comments on anybody at this point? Lucy?
Yeah, hey, Gordon. I think that I agree, like the roadmap is going to be critical. And I think what concerns me the most at this stage is the capacity, right? So because in the long term, when you're talking about looking at EIT and how much, we want to put in for capital projects, if we don't still have the capacity to execute, it's going to be very hard to come up with a number in terms of what we want to project. So I'm seeing that in terms of one of my concerns. And I, as we exit, it's no longer what is the position ordinance, what are the restrictions, it's really how do we get in there and provide and bolster the capacity that's needed. So I think that'll probably be somewhere where I ask a lot more questions as we move forward to try to work with administration on that if we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. I mean, what we've said to Abe and to others is, obviously the plan is in place and we have to follow it for the last 12 months or so, or whatever's left. But tell us what it is you think you need once you're out, right? And we'll try and find a way to make it work now, right? So that you're not blocked, so you don't feel like you're a runner in the starting blocks who's not allowed to move because the Act 47 coordinator has told you so. we understand that even when we put together the plan and we identified the capital project manager as being really, really important, we had a sense how much EIT you would get. We didn't ever envision $60 million coming from the feds, right? I know that the folks who have been there have been pulled in a lot of directions. Public Works, as I was explaining this to someone on a call with the Commonwealth this week, is the easiest way for you to think about Public Works in a department in a city like Reading. We weren't talking about Reading, but in a city like Reading is you have a police department, you have a fire department, you have a finance department, and you have everything else. And there's a pretty good chance that Public Works is in charge of everything else. And we want there to be enough capacity there. The administration wants that too. It's not like they didn't want it, but we want to set you guys up for success so that you're able to really take advantage of both the EIT money, which we knew would be there, and the ARPA money, which we didn't.
All right, Marcia?
Well, thank you again, Gordon, for presenting where we are with the plan. And my one thought moving forward, and I want to ask my fellow counselors to consider this as an ordinance, requiring there to be a plan that builds on the Act 47 plan to keep us in compliance, that we have an overarching document that looks at city finances so that we have a plan that says this is what we're going to be doing, rather than coming to the time that we go to adopt a budget and then reacting. Because my experience pre-Act 47 is that is how we operated. We now have a history of how the structure of an Act 47 plan has helped us. And I think we need to now become disciplined enough to be able to come up with our own plan that says, this is how we're going to stay in compliance with what we need to do with fiscal guidelines. And looking at the issue that Councilwoman Sahownick brought up about capacity, just so that we have a measured. And I think that will take, again, great discipline on our part, but I believe it's what needs to happen. Because if not, if we don't have that to reflect back on, then it goes 1 year from the next with reacting to a budget rather than being proactive. And I would ask any fellow council members and the administration how we could team together on that type of ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments at this time? Donna?
Just as we're looking at the rescue money coming to us, Gordon, what is your feeling about outside entity helping the city with the administration?
Yeah, so we've talked about that with Jamar, and my understanding is that on the reporting side, what you'll have to do is you'll have to do quarterly reports. I think, and you should talk to, I think it's probably Jamar, but maybe Jamar and Jamal. I think you'll be okay with the federal filing the mechanical stuff, right? Where you have to file and say this is, you have to log into the system and use your DUNS number or whatever it is. I think you'll be okay there. Some places really won't because they have not had those programs for a long time or have not had this level of federal funding. There will be an element of the quarterly reports where you talk about where you're spending the money. And the funny thing is with the ARPA money, at least the way it looks now, if you want to spend it on yourself, you have a lot of work to do up front and then very little work to do on the back. So up front, you have to say, this is the amount of revenue I've lost. I've taken all my revenues. I've done the calculation. I've done all the variables. I've crossed all the T's. And now this is the amount I have to spend. And then once you're into the reporting, it's like, and I spend it on myself, right? And you don't have to differentiate by, I mean, you do have to explain where you spend it, but you don't have to differentiate operations versus capital, police versus fire, revenue replacement versus expenses. It's really at least at this point, the way they've scoped it out is prove to me that you can spend the money and then go spend it. The opposite of that is true when you have external help. So if you're looking to do something related to public health, something related to economic development, something related to water or sewer infrastructure. And again, RAWA will not get its own allocation. So if you want something to happen there, you'd have to give them the money. I think you're going to have more reporting requirements. So there's a very long-winded answer to your question. If you think you're going to spend a lot of money outside, giving it to people for medical purposes, for economic development, for community development, and those boxes are all very wide, then I think you might want to look and try and get some help. Because once you get into that, now you have to track sub-recipients and awards and contract dates and all the things. Now, maybe you guys have the capacity to do that. Those concepts aren't new to Reading. You have ESG, you have home, you have those programs. We already do that. But if this is going to result in such a surge of not contact tracing, but contract tracing, you may need to add some help there in that realm. For the smaller cities we work with, we started to reach out to some accounting firms where we know that those places lack the basic accounting capacity. I don't think you have that issue, but that's generally where we've turned so far for the specific compliance accounting related stuff. That's I think that's how I think I would handle it, is look and see where you think the breakdown is. How much money are you going to spend outside of yourself, outside of the revenue replacement category? And then have the conversation, okay, do we have the internal capacity to track those contracts and that spending? Because if, like some places, like take Wilkes-Barre, for example, they're going to spend most of their money on themselves. They're not going to have very much to trace in terms of contracts. Other places are going to say, hey, you know what, I either my revenue loss, like county governments where the revenue loss isn't going to be that significant or where they have such large amount, they're going to have to spend a lot of money on the outside world. So they're going to have to add that capacity if they don't have it already.
All right, additional comments or questions for Gordon? Okay, Gordon, thank you again for the presentation. Couple things. Now that we're coming down
Hey, Jeff, excuse me. I'm sorry. I didn't hit mute fast enough. Maria had her hand up.
Who did?
Maria.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Maria.
I just want to make a comment regarding to what Gordon just mentioned, that it's going to be for the city moving forward. We have to think how much the city can afford to spend, and I would say that that is critical, especially the general fund money. After the city get out of the Act 47, the administration and the city has to have to think how this, how money is going to be spent, especially out of the general fund money. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So, Gordon, I've talked about this before, and we're down to the final year. We have to start exploring PFN staying on board just in a consultant role, and not maybe to the magnitude that you have been, but to one of assistance throughout the year and certainly during budget time. I think one of the practices we want to instill moving forward is the 5-year projections every time we go through the budget process, instead of making budgetary decisions in the 1-year vacuum. Yep. It's certainly been the one tool that's helped us stay ahead of, some of the parameters of Act 47. And we may even be able to get some state assistance with that. But even if we don't, it's something we need to strongly consider, especially there's not a whole lot of permanency in city government, specifically in city council and even in key administrative roles. So it's important that we have that oversight moving forward. So something I hope you can start the discussions with the administration and keep us posted. The issue about the commuter tax still lingers over us. Those 3/10 have helped us quite a bit from capping our debt service by not, we used to fund our capital expenses primarily through debt.
Yeah.
It's allowed us to do many things. Now there's a backlog. I understand that. But we've also gotten a lot of things done. It's something we need to continue to pursue with the state. I don't know if other Act 47 cities, as they're coming out, are feeling that same pain. But, I've always said if it made sense in Act 47, it makes sense outside of Act 47. And I know I want to get Marcia mad at me, but I always said, Act 47 is, a way for the state to deal with other failed state policies, if you will. They haven't changed. They're still there. We'll deal with them. I'm not afraid of us getting through the future. Many of you know, I started in 1998. I believe at the time, the 5-year projection was we were going to tank. I was on an audit committee at that time. And the thoughts were then, yeah, if we keep doing the same things, yeah, we'll end up at that space. So every year we've had to calibrate, and we've had some things work out for us. There's certainly some things we need to lower where we can. But the city's been able to survive, and it's not so much what you spend, it's how you spend it. It's really the net results that you got to measure things by. And I don't know that we always end up where we want to be there, but that's a whole different discussion. But we appreciate the update. We certainly look forward to working with you in the budget season, to really solidify those 5-year numbers again, and put us in good footing for next year. It's been quite a journey. I don't even remember how many years we've been in this now. It's total of how many?
11.
11, yeah. Between this and the consent decree, wow, it's been a.
Yeah, that predates us by a little bit, but not a whole lot. I think a year or two.
Yeah. All right. So we appreciate the report. And Gordon, we'll be in touch. If there are no other comments at this time, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. So thank you, Gordon.
Right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Next, we have with us this evening, I believe we have Mike Gombar, Mike Gellerman. I'm not sure who else we have from the authority, but we're all well aware of the needs that have been expressed by them. Something we've been trying to get on the agenda for many weeks now, and I know we wanted to give Abe and the administration enough time too to get ahead of it. Abe, did you want to start off with any thoughts before we turn it over to Mike and Mike?
Yes, I just want to thank everybody for making sure that the city was included in these discussions. I did have a very productive meeting today with members of the convention board at 11 a.m. this morning, where they gave me more information. And this afternoon, I was provided with a detailed analysis of the arena's needs. And I just appreciate the thoroughness. I appreciate having this document made available to us, and I'm looking forward to their presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Abe. And I'll turn it over to Mike and Mike.
Well, I'll start as the first Mike.
All right.
In addition to Mr. Gumbar, we have Dave Farrar on, and maybe he could turn his video on also.
I apologize. Welcome.
David is not a board member, but he is the individual responsible for running both of the facilities as well as the hockey team. And because I am an appointment from the county, we decided that it would be appropriate to have Mr. Gumbar, who is a city appointment, and our vice chairman, to lead this effort tonight. And David and I will back his backup when he has a problem or an opportunity for us. Mr. Gumbar?
Thank you, Mike, and good evening again, everyone. I'm here a week after wearing a different hat for you, but as Mike said, I am the vice chairman of the authority. I'm a resident of the city and appreciate the appointment to the authority for the last going on 5 years now. But as mentioned, we had a good meeting with Abe this morning. I think set out good foundation as far as what the authority's needs are. I'll do my best to summarize that for you here. I know everybody's busy and already taken up a lot of time tonight, but basically the Convention Center Authority is here to formally request from the city $3 million in grant funding to serve two purposes. One, to put a dent in some of the revenue loss that we have had over the past year and a half after suffering through COVID. I'm sure, as all of you know, doors have been shuttered for the last year and a half. No hockey, no concerts, no events, no revenue coming in at all. At this point, we're looking at an approximate loss of $6.2 million in total. That is our best guesstimate at this point, and it comes in two forms. First is the obvious loss in revenue for events, but the second part is the loss in revenue from the hotel tax as well too. So as everyone can imagine, rooms have been down, and that impacts us directly since that is a significant source of revenue for the authority. Hopefully, as you can see, events are being booked fast and furious with David, and while he's here, thanks for all his hard work in doing that. We're looking forward to, an exciting Royal season coming up here and some more events to get started in the fall. But we're not sure, how that's going to impact hotel rooms. And, as everybody's seeing in the news today, we're not sure what the future of COVID holds for us either as well too. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. So that's the first portion of the request is for the loss of revenue. But the second portion is also to assist in some of the capital expenditures that are needed for the arena and the Performing Arts Center. I think we were here a couple months ago giving our update, and at that time we noted that we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the arena in September. And I know it's hard to believe, but we are 20 years out, and as you can imagine, 20 years, things become obsolete, things need repairs, and we're starting to be faced with a lot of that. So in addition to the loss of revenue, we have over $6 million worth of capital expenditures that we need to undertake. A good portion of them, approximately $4 million of that, is worth what we're considering normal wear and tear. So things that need to be replaced, repaired, updated, just at both the arena and the Performing Arts Center. The balance of that are what we consider enhancements. And these are very important to us. We do have competition close by in Hershey and Allentown. And in order to, keep up with that competition and make sure that, we're putting our best foot forward when it comes to promoters and acts and other attractions to come here, we need to make sure that we have, a top quality venue with all the bells and whistles that go with it. So we are asking we do have approximately $2 million worth of enhancements there. And that does include an existing enhancement that we took up, honestly, months before COVID, and that was to put a Wi-Fi system throughout the entire arena that was needed. So we've been paying on that, but there's approximately $600,000 left on that capital expenditure lease as well too. So that's kind of the basis for our needs. The reasons we're coming to you are many, but I'll try to summarize them as well too. We believe that both the arena and the Performing Arts Center are key to the continued economic development and growth of the city. Obviously, the arena is an anchor for Penn Street. Not only does it attract people into the building, but it attracts people to restaurants and other businesses around as well too. On average, I think we estimate approximately 400,000 people are being drawn to both of those venues on an annual basis. They're not only just coming to the arena, but they're also spending money around at our local businesses as well too. Also, as you know, the amusement tax is another source of revenue for the city that comes directly from the Royals and from other events, and that's generating over $400,000 a year on average as well too. We also contribute to the parking authority for people who are attending, events, and that's generating around $325,000 a year on average. So, we look at it as, there's a significant amount of revenue that's coming back to the city and coming back to the community through specifically our events and the arena and the Performing Arts Center. So, you know, the $3 million is not just a request, but we look at it as an investment as well too in the city. The arena and Performing Arts Center does also contribute as far as taxes go. It's, you heard, we do have many employees within the city, and there's a lot of local purchasing going on that's generating close to $2 million on an annual basis as well too. So, you know, we think we're a key statistic, you know, towards the city and the betterment of the city and downtown. So that's the importance that we're seeing, and part of why we're here. You know, the other part of it is, I think, worth noting, and everybody knows it as well too, but the county has committed $3 million to the authority already to help assist with this. And although the arena and the Performing Arts Center are not owned by the city, we do, you know, consider them, you know, assets of the city nonetheless. So we look at U.S. stakeholders in our success as well too. So that is also part of it. You know, and the last part I would just like to point out, I think everybody on this call is aware of it, but you know, I think it's important to us to reiterate that 2 years ago, the Reading Royals were on their way out of the city potentially. The prior owner was looking to sell the team and had an offer on the table to potentially move them to a Midwest town. Knowing the importance of the Royals to the city and to the arena and to the downtown, the authority did step in and purchased the team from the prior owner at that time, you know, in order to prevent the team from leaving, to make sure that we had that anchor of the Royals for the community and for the arena, you know, moving forward in the future. So we did take a big step a couple years ago to make sure that that occurred, and we're proud of that decision and we stand by it. You know, if not for COVID, I think the Royals were headed towards another successful season, and you know, we're really looking forward to next year coming up in the next few months here as well too. So that's pretty much my spiel. I don't know if Mike or David, you have anything to add to that?
I'll add just a couple of items. First of all, I think it's important that everybody remember that this is a joint authority between the city and the county. The way the board is composed, there are 3 automatics to the city for 4-year terms and 3 to the county. The odd 7th person rotates between the 2 every 4 years. It is currently in the hands of the county. It just left the city last year. I think another important point is that we're really not in competition with the Reading Phils directly. They're a summer season compared to us, pretty much non-summer. Yes, we have a little bit of sports in there, particularly with the Royals, some basketball and things, but the majority of our constituency or attendees probably don't even go to most sporting events, many of them. Now, concerts are a little different. There is a mix there. But I think it's important to notice that we bring in an average of about 400,000 people annually between the 2 venues. And that's pretty close to what the ballpark brings in. The third thing is, Mike, you said this and you said it directly, COVID isn't over. There is some recovery that still has to take place. And all you have to do is read the national news media right now of what's going on in this country with this Delta virus. The room nights that we're seeing locally aren't even close to where we were in the last fiscal year that we experienced prior to COVID. And I think it's going to be a while before that really comes back. A lot of that is business travel that uses the hotel motels locally. And a lot of the businesses are not traveling yet. And I think it's going to be some time before that occurs. So the problems that we've experienced aren't over. I think the bulk of it is, but we still have some time left. David, do you have any comments? We are within 5 minutes of the allotted time.
No, Mike, I think I'm good. I appreciate everybody's time tonight.
I think we'd be happy to answer any questions, member of council or otherwise.
Yeah. All right, Mike and David, thank you. We will open it up for some comments or questions, and I'll save mine to the very end. Who would like to go first? Lucy?
Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for your thoughtful presentation. I'm always thrilled that you and the arena are in the very corner of my district and the downtown. People are often shocked that that is District 1. So I'm very happy to hear that you've been ongoing in your conversations with the administration, even as early as today, and appreciate what you have said to us this evening. I think that it's no surprise that your industry specifically, whether you're looking at hospitality and or sports and or music, has been completely pummeled by what has occurred. So, I think my question really is that it sounds that you're requesting 3 million from the city and 3 million from the county, and that makes sense as a joint authority as your approach. But the loss in revenue, I guess you projected at about 6.5 million. In addition, you stated the capital expenditures you would also use this funding towards that. So do you are you anticipating that full $6 million that you're requesting is going to go and meet your needs of those two things, especially since you've been there 20 years and you're just now coming out maybe in the wake of a pandemic? Can you talk a little bit about kind of what your strategy there is and how to allocate that 6 million that you're asking in total?
Mike, you want to do it or me?
Go ahead, Mike.
Lucine, I think if we had our druthers, we would probably prefer to use as much as possible on capital, because those are real hard dollars and absolutely necessary with a facility this age. The amount of dollars that we put into SPAC is relatively minor comparatively. But the big building, which it requires huge volumes of CFM heat in the winter, but still you've got ice down there and everything, is a very expensive operation. And for that reason, that would be my first preference. The second thing that we did not tell you is we got through this past year by hook or by crook, I guess I couldn't call it. But first and foremost, PNC, who is the bondholder, and the outstandings are about $8 million, fortuitously allowed us to defer principal for 2 years, about $1.3 million. All of that will have to be replaced. So, and I don't think that's going to qualify for these kind of dollars that we're talking about. But if we use our money to take care of that 1.3, it frees up cash that would have had to go into capital. So there's a way of playing that just a little bit. The rest of the things that we were successful in doing during that period, we had a major renegotiation with the management firm, who reduced its annual fee considerably. Also did a rebate for about 7 months cash-wise. those are behind us. We don't have any makeup to do. So first and foremost, to me, would be the capital side. The rest of it can go to short revenue. Does that answer the question?
It does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, additional questions or comments? Donna?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this presentation and for detailing the information that we need to know as we consider this. I think it's good to keep in mind what the arena has done and brought to the community over the last 20 years, and it is hard to believe that it's 20 years. And it's always seemed to be a challenge because as many people remember, it opened officially the Friday before the Tuesday of 9/11. So all this hopeful thing, everything everyone was so hopeful about, we went into that national tragedy just 5 days later. But it's persevered. And it took 49 years from the original thought of a convention center to finally getting one in downtown Reading. I think it has been, a benefit for the city. I hope that we see as economic recovery continues, more ancillary businesses finally popping up along with the hotel. The hotel was critical, and it would have been nice to have seen that when the arena was built. That would have been perfect had they arrived at the same time. But again, this is the kind of thing that while people may be concerned about public monies going into it, the public benefit of the arena, of the Performing Arts Center, and of the ballpark can't be underplayed. So I'm hopeful as we look at all these needs, we can find a way to make them come true and become real, and we can celebrate the 20th anniversary, looking to some brighter days ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, additional comments? Marcia?
Yes, and thank you, gentlemen. I think it was very apropos for you to come forward to us, considering that your facility, both the performing arts and the arena were impacted by COVID. And I guess the question in the back of my mind is, I know how the center is a core, but the Performing Arts Center in itself is a real icon to the city. Sometimes I think it's forgotten, except for those that come there for the concerts and events. And when you look at the construction of it, it resembles very much the quality of a New York Broadway theater, has some of the same attributes. Any thoughts on anything that's needed there? Because I know you're focusing on your capital at the convention center.
David?
Yeah, there's some capital items needed there. Obviously, the air conditioning units all need to be replaced. The heat needs to be replaced. There's some modifications in the lobby and dressing rooms downstairs that we'd like to do. And a good chunk of the building needs to be painted. So there's definitely some items there that we'd like to get checked off our list here.
Okay, and I would hope that we can get the community support just to recognize the beauty of that building. I know that the symphony's worked on improving the acoustical qualities of it, but just to be able to say that we have a real gem in downtown Reading with both the facilities, to be able to really capitalize on them and really, make Reading come back alive. So I'm just the one who just enjoys sitting to the symphony concerts. And I understand that we want to keep the Reading Symphony in downtown Reading, as well as bringing other types of arts that may not work as well in a larger venue to the Performing Arts Center. So thank you for that consideration.
All right, additional comments, anyone?
David, you might want to address the attendance at SPAC, because most people do not appreciate. They think of the symphony, they think of a show here and there, but that has been put to quite a bit of use. Your bookings right now, you could address to for the next 4 or 5 months of the season.
We're really excited about the lineup at the Performing Arts Center. We announced Cheap Trick and Brian Wilson today for 2 separate shows. We announced Cirque Holidays yesterday, which is sold out. every year. Our Broadway series is as good as you'll find anywhere, with Rent, Jersey Boys, Cats, 2 shows of Blue Man Group, and then another show that we'll announce here in November after it plays off in Philly. But really proud of the lineup we have. I think we're over 65 shows for the next year. And Marcia's right, it's a beautiful building. We do a ton of shows up there, and it's a great piece for downtown Reading.
Any additional comments? I just have a couple of brief comments. So I believe that the ARP money is meant for projects like this. There are certain economic pillars of the city that obviously have suffered through the pandemic. There weren't a whole lot of PPP plans and other things out there meant specifically for kind of the infrastructure of these facilities. And just like the Reading Phillies, the stadium and the Performing Arts Center, the arena and the Performing Arts Center, they are faces of the city. So we want them to be top notch. And when people come here, we want them to come back, not only for those arenas and those theaters, but for other things in the city. The other side of that is that you've had proven success. That's important. I think, early on, Mike, this, people thought, well, nobody would come. Well, they do come. And we want to make sure they continue to come. And we want to build upon some of the other successes we're starting to have downtown. We certainly don't want to pull pillars out or see them crumble. So I fully support the process. I'm extremely excited and grateful for the county's commitment, not only with this project, but with the Reading Phillies. This has been a really good cooperative effort on both parts. And I think it's important that we continue to work together as a region. And I'm glad that they've stepped up as well. And what I'm hoping to do is want to review this with Abe and the administration, but we hope to get a resolution on the table for next Monday. I know you guys have some capital commitments you got to work through. We'll put that to the test next Monday evening. And I'm not hearing a whole lot of objections from the body at this point. Want to have an opportunity to review it directly with Abe and the mayor. I've heard nothing but support from them as well. So we're excited about moving this forward. We're sorry for any delays, but there's always a busy agenda. But we've never felt any less about the Performing Arts Center and the Santander Arena than we did about anything else. And we are excited about not only your organization, but hopefully the Reading Phillies being able to relaunch and get prepared for the next 10 years and continue to bring in the big acts. And maybe I was going to ask, is there any chance I can sing with Cheap Trick when they come in town?
Oh, you want to avoid that.
Yeah, you do. They'll end their tour at that point. But anyway, Mike and David, we really appreciate you taking the time to come to us, putting some of the information together. I understand there's a spreadsheet on some of the capital expense projections. If we could get that forwarded to us, just so the body has it, we'll make sure everyone gets it, and we'll put it to test next week.
We did a brief report today for Abe.
Okay.
And I don't think he would have any objection to supplying this same summary that has the CapEx in it. It talks to everything that we summarized tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Plus a few other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll ask Abe to send it to us.
Yeah, not at all. I'm happy to send that. In fact, I'm looking through my email right now, and I will forward it to council members this evening. Thanks.
Oh, you saved me the problem. Thank you, Abe.
Thank you. Okay, so good discussion. Are there any other comments on this specific issue? If not, we're going.
This is not just directly to the issue.
Sure.
But I think we want you to understand that one of our goals from the very beginning in the late 90s, when this concept germinated finally, to be a good citizen downtown, to help the community. And we had a number of programs that we had to stop, defer during COVID. We had a scholarship program where we would give 2 4-year, $2,000 per year scholarships to high school graduates who had an entertainment bent for their college education. We supported DID, not only with a fee from the very beginning, but also strong financial support on behalf of Downtown Live. We've supported the Visitors Bureau years because we thought it was an important ingredient for the community. We've been behind Jazz Fest, Blues Fest, and many of these other efforts. So we intend to get back to on track when this impact of COVID is over and share in what I see as a really potential renaissance for downtown. What Alvernia has done to get people excited, looking at things differently, is going to mature. And we all have to work together to continue that growth. We thank you, council, administration, and everyone for your support and help in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much, Mike, and David. We'll certainly talk with you soon. All right.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council. That brings us to energy savings and sustainability. And we have Stan with us and Nicole this evening to step us through that. I don't know, Stan or Nicole, who wants to go first. But,
Yes, I would like to start this, please. First, if council's indulgence, working with administration, they allowed Public Works to effectively split the department, because if people realized it was under one person could not do what it is being achieved now with Nicole and Bethany. But I also have to say thank you to Steve Harrity as well. He's doing an outstanding job with his team, Carlos Torres and Ron Epps. These are 5 strong people who are doing an outstanding job. And just to let everybody know that this presentation from Nicole and Bethany is just an outgrowth of their integrity and of what we in the city of Reading want to achieve, not only this coming year, but within the next 5 years, working in administration with council. And you're going to see some very interesting things on this slide presentation. And then in the next few months and years, you're going to see more and more and more come about. With that, I'd like to introduce Nicole and Bethany. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Stan. I really appreciate that. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nicole Judge, Sustainability Manager for the city, and I'm joined today by Bethany Ayers-Fisher, our Public Outreach and Education Coordinator. And we were asked to come on tonight to just update you on some of the projects that we're working on in the Sustainability Department, as well as field any questions that you may have at this point, and get your feedback on some of these. We have 3 topics that we're going to discuss tonight. The first one being a new partnership with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection for an energy efficiency program for our wastewater treatment plant. And then going into electric vehicle infrastructure for the city, as well as fleet electrification. So I will hand it over to Beth to discuss the first project, and we will pause between each to get any questions or comments. Beth, just let me know when you need me to change the slide.
Why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you, counselors, and also to Stan for having us here tonight. So we have joined in a joint partnership with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection with their Energy Programs Office. And this program is funded through the Department of Energy, and it is specific to wastewater treatment plants in Pennsylvania. And this partnership agreement will help provide us technical assistance and training in expanding our energy efficiencies within our wastewater treatment system. It also will provide us with a free energy assessment through a third-party qualified energy auditor. And this is going to help us examine where we can make improvements to our energy efficiency and also things that we should be considering down the road. We will be getting assistance in conducting data analysis, especially with where our needs are and where we are using our electricity. And then also with helping within our cohort, having the ability to share best practices between plants and also share the information that's found within the study cohort to help other wastewater treatment plants implement some of these best practices. Nicole, I think we can go to the next slide. This multi-year partnership with the DEP will run through 2023, and it's going to look at 5 years worth of energy data. So 2 previously, so I believe it's 2019 and 2020. And then we're going to be looking at 21, 22, and 23. We have established an energy reduction goal of 25%. We will be creating an ongoing energy management plan to help keep us lean and efficient while keeping our optimization of the plant at the highest level of quality. We will be attending training sessions and stakeholder meetings with the DOE to help us make sure that we're able to continue being the most efficient as we possibly can. And then we will be sharing our results and lessons, not only with the DEP and our other cohort members, but also being able to use what we've learned with other programs as well. And this is expected to kick off late summer. We will be having the initial kickoff meeting, hopefully sometime in August with our cohort. And this assessment and the training is at no cost to the city. So that's a very exciting thing. So we're looking at saving several thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. We would not be able to do a program like this by ourselves without this program. So we're very, very excited about it. Does anybody have any questions? No questions. Awesome. Well, yes.
Knock.
Was there a question?
No, I don't think so, Bethany. Please continue. That's okay. We'll say something.
Jeff, this is Marcia. I do just have a comment to make.
Sure.
Well, first of all, thank you for your good teamwork. And I think with everything that's being planned with the wastewater treatment plant, I think it's important for all of council, just as we had a tour as it was initially being constructed, for us to have a site tour. I think it becomes more real when you're on site there to understand what's happening.
Yeah, we'll be excited to take you through and keep you updated as this project progresses.
Mark, if I may, we are in our punch list stage now. We have essentially finished the liquid side. We're doing work on the polymers and the solid side as we speak. So there's still construction activity going on as we now. And I would suspect in the mid to late September, early October timeframe, we should be able to accomplish the site tours.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's move on. Thank you, Beth, for that.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, on to electric vehicle or EV infrastructure. First, we're going to start out with the question, why? Why is it important for the city of Reading? As you'll note to the left here, there's several direct benefits to the community in transitioning over to electric vehicles. The first is that EVs have 0 tailpipe emissions, which has a direct effect on air quality. And as we know, greenhouse gas emissions from fuel combustion contributes to climate change. So transitioning over to EVs will help to slow climate change. One of the statistics that came out of GreenBiz was that 71% of American drivers surveyed said that they are interested in getting EVs, but 48% said that the lack of infrastructure was holding them back. So that's another important benefit of starting to build this infrastructure, is that it encourages people to invest in electric vehicles. And then finally, having that infrastructure in place will help to attract investment in the community from potential businesses. So this blue box here shows you kind of a state of where we are right now in Pennsylvania. And this was taken from the Pennsylvania Electric Vehicle Roadmap 2021 update that recently came out. This first infographic at the top shows that from 2017 to 2020, the amount of registrations for electric vehicles doubled. The second map on the bottom here shows concentration of electric vehicle registrations in the state. And while we don't have very much in Reading itself, you can see that Philadelphia and our surrounding neighbors do have quite a few. And then the roadmap progress check mark over here shows that to date, and this number is a little outdated, as I heard last week from the department, that they've actually installed over 1,000 level 2 charging plugs in Pennsylvania so far, and more than 25 DC or direct charge fast charging plugs. So we looked at where we are, and now we've got to look at where we're going. So we're essentially entering the electric vehicle boom, where we expect to see sales to increase exponentially. And that goes in follow suit to several of the announcements that our large auto manufacturers have made. GM pledged to stop making gasoline-powered vehicles by 2035, and other large manufacturers have pledged to stop by 2040. So now that we've went over why, let's look at some of the other important questions. So who are we looking at partnering with? Well, we've had several conversations with ChargePoint. They are an electric charging station manufacturer, and there's a lot of benefits to partnering with this manufacturer. One, they offer a turnkey solution. So they have an extensive maintenance program that covers parts, including vandalism, their proactive troubleshooting with their software, one business day on-site response from a qualified technician. And they also have a software package that offers flexibility, wait lists, access controls, multilingual videos, power management, scheduled charging, data analytics, and it comes with an application for drivers to find the stations. In addition, they provide a free expert site evaluation, as well as assistance in applying for the rebates, which we'll go into in the next slide. The current turnaround time that they're estimating is around 2 weeks. And then they've also completed several projects for our sister cities, such as Philadelphia, Lancaster, Allentown, and major universities, as well as retail in the area. And an added benefit is they are a Sourcewell supplier, which is a cooperative purchasing program of which the city is a member. So we also get a discount through them. What are we looking at? So pictured to the left is a level 2 commercial charging station. So this gives you an idea of what they look like. Where are we looking at putting them? We're looking at publicly accessible lots and parking garages, and we're aligning efforts with the Reading Parking Authority for site selection. And then finally, when are we looking at installing these? Should it be approved? We are looking to have sites selected by mid to late August, with site evaluation from ChargePoint by one of their experts following. And then of course, a formal request for funds. From that point, once we place an order, it's like a 3 to 4 week shipping time and a 1-day install. So around 30 to 45 days from order. And then finally, just a little bit more about cost and funding of this equipment. So going into funding, this through the Driving PA Forward program offers grants to up to $100,000 per entity. There are some restrictions. There's a max of 12 charging plugs per site, or 6 stations. That has to be available to the public for 80 hours per week with required signage and adequate lighting. They have to be networked with centralized management and diagnostics. We basically have to complete the project within 80 days of application. Other key things is that the chargers have to be maintained and operated for at least a minimum of 3 years from date of completion, and we're required to supply that data for 3 years to the Department of Environmental Protection. And then cost is approximately $3,000. That's a conservative estimate, assuming the $8,000 rebate, because it's $4,000 per plug, and the $2,000 equipment discount we get through Sourcewell. And then also purchasing the 5-year maintenance plan and software plan. And then as I've said, we've had conversations with the Parking Authority on their commitment of funds, as well as we have some monies allocated in the sustainability fund in the city budget for projects like these. So I will pause and welcome any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. I'm sure there's got to be some questions and comments on this specific topic. Anybody want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll start, Jeff.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Donna,
Go ahead, Lucine.
I have everybody minimized. Okay, so very excited to see the recommendation of EV and infrastructure, Nicole. I think it makes sense, and I'm wondering if you have done some basic comparison as to a county approach. Do they have it? Where do they have it versus what do we have in the city? Have you done any of that research yet?
No, not specifically, Lucine. Like I said, I have the total amount installed within the state. And I know that that ChargePoint specifically has worked in their sister cities on projects installing these stations, but I'm sorry, I don't have any additional detail, but I'll look into that.
Yeah, I'd love to see that, because when I saw the map of where we're seeing current concentrated areas with those with electric vehicles, I would assume that it would be an absolute economic benefit for us to encourage people from Philadelphia to be safely and traveling with ease to come for trips and feel, confident. And that's not only just to the city of Reading, like places we've been talking about earlier in our conversations, like the baseball stadium and the arenas for concerts, but also throughout the county, countywide amenities as well. So I'd love to see that and see us continue to be working on things like that together. But also, you say that monies are allocated in the sustainability fund. How many initial stations are you looking at? And do you have an idea of where you'd like them to be placed, or is it still too preliminary at this point to share that information?
We've had some initial conversations just based on what we think we could afford at this time is around 10 to 12 from the city. And then with the Parking Authority, they were looking at this project separately prior to our conversation. So I know they're looking at somewhere around 6 to 8 stations in the garages. So a total of around 60 at this point. But again, very preliminary. We need really more information to give you a definite answer.
Okay, great.
Donna?
A couple questions. One, and I'm not sure how this works in other places, but is access to these charging stations free, or is there a fee involved for vehicle owners? And secondly, a necessary thought is, how vandal proof are they?
So the first question, so you have central management through the software, and essentially you have control of the pricing of how much you charge for a charging station. You have a lot of control with the management through the software. You can limit during peak hours, control power management through the software, have a wait list so you can limit the amount of time people are there, as well as charge penalties for going over your allotted time. And the wait list function allowing people to sign up to get in line basically for the charging station. So I think that's a conversation that definitely needs to be had in more detail, but you do have the ability to kind of price, it's flex billing, price adjust. And then I'm sorry, Donna, I didn't hear the second question. Would you mind repeating that?
The second, I turned off video instead of mute. The second question was regarding how these are done in urban environments, that there's nothing's ever vandal proof, but how's the security for them? How is that obtained?
And I don't have an answer to that. I'll definitely look into that. I do know that the warranty package covers vandalism for the stations, and there is 24/7 support for drivers. And as I said, there was a 1 business day turnaround for on-site technician to service the stations. But I do know that through the rebate requirements, they do require certain signage and adequate lighting. So that could contribute to some security.
Donna, if I may, there are also in some localities requirements for cameras. But then again, I have to caution that there are turnpike commissions that have installed charging stations, and there was no rules against large monster tire trucks parking in front of them. And so they had a lot of issues. Bethany, we've talked about it. Nicole, we've talked about it. So we're just going to have to make sure that if they're in a parking garage, that there's correct signage. But there are issues. And that's not to belabor a point, but there are issues. And it's just something as we move forward, we're just going to have to understand the dynamics and ensure that these are in place, because we don't want to buy something that gets destroyed in 2 weeks. You're right, Donna. Thank you.
Okay, additional comments or questions?
Yeah, Jeff, Marcia. And Jess, this is really enlightening. In my recent travels, I was just astounded by the number of charging stations that I saw at different locations. It was like, wow, we're at a point now, thank goodness, that we're finally able to say that we're ready to get off of using fossil fuel for running our automobiles. And I wish I had an electric car at this point, just have a hybrid. But I'm glad that the city is so forward thinking on this. But I also think it needs to be a collaborative process, working within Berks County, and also knowing where I've seen them, at least in the states that I've traveled to, have been at locations such as Starbucks. A lot of businesses have them installed now. So we may want to look at how we dovetail with whether there's other business entities within the city that are thinking the same way, and come up with a plan, a charging station plan, just like you need to definitely work closely with the parking authority. Where are the best locations, and where might private entities be planning on placing them too? Because I think this is up and coming. And the more that people can see that we're forward thinking, the better off we're going to be as far as competitiveness, as more people switch. And I think what you'll see is as the cars become available, people are going to start to be buying the electric cars rather than depending on the gas guzzlers. Thank you.
All right, additional comments or questions? All right, is there one more section, Nicole?
Yes, there is one last topic. So fleet electrification. We are partnering with the Electrification Coalition. They are a nonprofit working with climate mayors, and they provide a free analysis of our city fleet. And they make recommendations for replacements. The analysis includes a cost estimate of transitioning, including installing charging stations, the cost savings of transitioning to electric vehicles, and recommended replacements based on vehicle model and specs. And they'll also assist with possible funding and incentives. And we're really looking at this just to start getting information so we can start planning and budgeting for this transition. And just to offer an example, this is a case study that when they partnered with Jersey City, after performing the analysis, they recommended a closed-end lease through the collaborative, and that allowed them to pay only for the time the vehicle was used. And after the term was over, they could be turned back in and replaced with the latest technology, as that is a big consideration when transitioning to EV fleets is the speed at which new models are becoming available. So that could be something that we're looking at, is just a pilot similar to the Jersey City case study. They leased 4 2020 Nissan Leafs, and they paid 75% of the vehicle cost, but they received 100% of that federal tax credit savings of $7,500, netting in a total savings of $30,000. So that would definitely be something that we're looking into through this analysis. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nicole and Bethany. Are there any additional questions or comments for the team? All right, well, we'll look forward to the proposal on the charging stations. Just a lot of unknowns on the build out of the infrastructure. I think the city planting seeds is certainly a good thing. Longer term, who knows who's gonna lead the way? Is it a combination of government and energy companies and auto companies? Time will tell. Obviously, when it fuels to a certain point, it's going to require a lot of infrastructure, and it may be more gradual than we believe, but that might be the best way to get there too. So we'll cross each bridge as it comes. So thank you for the report, and going to go back to our agenda, council, and I don't think we have anything else scheduled this evening. So I'm going to open it up for any other items, not only to council, but to the administration that needs to be reviewed this evening. Is there anything anybody would like to have discussed publicly this evening? With Donna and then Stan.
And I think, Jeff, you and I had a conversation earlier today about enhanced communication regarding different things. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Oh, regarding the events, yeah, let me come back to that. Stan, you had a comment, sir?
Yes, I do. And this is a comment regarding the kiddie pool. This was near and dear to everybody's heart. Through Cindy Kastner and the team, they went back to the contractor, and the contractor is going to do the rebuild of the kiddie pool at the exact same cost it was initially allocated to. So that's a great thing. And I want to say thank you to Cindy and the team for that. It was a good effort, and Fred and Abe both know what has transpired over the past few weeks and months. So I wanted to say, yes, we did it, and the kiddie pool is coming back. However, I do like spray pads, so we may put a spray pad off to the side, just to let you know. So
Use better than one. Way to go, Stan.
we're trying.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Stan. We
welcome.
appreciate that. So that's a follow-up from our discussion last week. Yeah, Abe and Frank, I don't know. I guess there were a couple dignitaries in town today. I spoke to one or two council members. Anything we could do to improve the communication when any public dignitaries are going to be in town, just so some of us may have an opportunity to be there and also show the support. Not all of us. I can't get there very often during the day, but some others may. And I know it's not always easy to remember. Sometimes these things happen off the cuff, but where you do have an opportunity to give us some notification, we would appreciate that as well. And I'm sure.
Dignitaries, Council President, I'm unaware of any dignitaries, and I didn't attend any events with any today. I'm just curious.
And one may not even been the administration. I think the governor was in town today. And then there was Secretary of Agriculture, was in town today? And Abe, you're just getting back, so you may not even be familiar with it. Yeah.
Jeff, if I can make a comment just to better improve, I think that also council has to be really mindful. So us as a body, making sure that if something comes to one of us, we're trying to get that out and communicate with each other, especially in circumstances like today, if somebody is out of town or unable to attend, reaching out to say, hey, I can't make it, can somebody go? And I think that's really a responsibility internally on us, not necessarily the administration in their defense, to better improve on our internal communication as council, I think is part of this conversation. And I want to acknowledge that.
Anybody was aware of today's event. I don't even know. Was any council member there? I wasn't.
No, there wasn't, and it's unfortunate, specifically regarding what we're talking about with the Secretary of Agriculture for the state. I was notified because I received a general press release about the event. So there was not any direct communication, to us otherwise. But when I saw that, then it was kind of sending it out and recognizing that, whose district is that person available? It was way too late. So I think that my efforts for this topic specifically, because I'm very excited that it's National Urban Agriculture Week, and I'm very excited that Secretary Redding was here in our city celebrating National Urban Agriculture Week. I think that's tremendous. However, unfortunately, we didn't have a council representative. The mayor was there, and I'm so happy that he was, but we have to make sure that as council, we're communicating with ourselves, right? So let's try to make a better effort there.
I think when these things happen, though, I think what it shows is a divided city government. And maybe that's not what is happening, but what is clear is that, we finally have a situation where we all seem to be pretty much in tandem with each other. But the lack of communication, when it's not so much a question of photo ops. I mean, I get sort of sarcastic about those as a reporter, but the point of reference, when you have someone in the higher tiers of state or federal government who are here and the legislative component of city government is absent, I think that speaks volumes to someone saying, well, what's going on with that? I mean, there are only 7 of us individually. We have 0 clout, but collectively we have a lot, and we can represent our constituents and each other at these kind of things and say to the Secretary of Agriculture, hey, thanks for being here. We're all in this together. The governor, thanks for being here. We're all in this together. And I think that is what's missing, that being able to interact one-on-one with these folks in a brief moment in time with staff, I think that is very detrimental to both the view of the city from those folks and also to the external world. Like, do we care? Does council really even care about these things? I think that's very important.
All right, so we'll make efforts to communicate. I think we do for the most part, but we want to make sure. I don't know how often dignitaries get in town from the state. Honestly,
Well, and I think it's incumbent upon us then to make sure the administration knows. I think it has to be a two-way street.
Absolutely.
Because maybe sometimes we find out about something and we don't share.
That's
So
right.
I think I think it's on both of us, but the world is more than photo ops. The world is working with government on a variety of levels to show that there's a collective support for endeavors. And certainly urban ag, Lucine has done so much with that. But we also have problems here with that. And now we have established old community gardens in different parts of the city, Buttonwood and Division Street, you know, and there's a couple in my district. There's some in District 6 that really have been let go. And what is the plan for those? How can we revitalize them? You know, it's more than just the pretty ones. It's also the ones that have languished, and the different groups that supported them initially, where are they at now? So there's a lot to all these particular things, but certainly in Urban Ag Week, this would have been a time to look at those other areas and what can we do in another year to revitalize them.
Okay, additional comments, anybody? Any other topics? Marcia?
Yeah, and just to that extent, I understand where dignitaries coming in. It's great to be able to be part of it, but I think more importantly, as we plan our legislation, is to be looking at opportunities to work with the administration, to communicate with our elected officials at the state level, at the county level, to look at how we can collaborate. So it isn't only when they become present for a very short amount of time, because you always know when they come, everyone's on a schedule. And sometimes the things that you really want to say and get in depth, you can't do at those moments. So that we need to really think through where are those important issues that we need to work with the administration to communicate. And I thought it was very great that the governor came in and was supporting early childhood education and Head Start. That's so vital to our future of our city, to have our young people receiving those services. And so for me, it was a really win-win situation, not just for us to be present, but for our children. The same thing with the agriculture. I think having that come in and be looking at urban agriculture is a win. So I look at all of those as being very important for the city, and just looking at ways that we can keep the momentum going. So that's just my thought.
I don't think anyone from the city was at the YMCA, Marcia. That was without any city representation.
And that's fine. I think it was good that it happened. That was what my point was. Not for us to be there, but it was good that it happened.
But it's also good to show support. There's nothing wrong
And we
with
can show support by following up and giving a thank
we
you.
can do it multiple ways. We can each pick up the phone and call the governor's office, and maybe that's what should happen. That's
Yeah,
maybe a better way
exactly.
for us to go and call the different legislators and also the cabinet members to say that, you know, we care, we're here, and we'd love to interact with you. So maybe
Exactly.
that's something to do in next week.
Yep, that's great.
All right. I don't know if the Reading Phillies played. It would have been a good night to take the governor out for a game, right? Anyway, are there any other issues or comments at this time? Okay, Donna?
Just one more. I understand there have been some issues this week with the pagoda lights. I had asked Stan about that and I didn't hear back.
Yeah, I sent an email out to Stan too.
I didn't hear anything back.
Stan, I don't know if you're prepared to answer any of that or.
I was there at the Pagoda on Saturday. I noticed they were on as well. We have a work ticket in for the LEDs to have their timers changed. So yes, it is on our radar. It's just been crazy a little lately, and I may not have seen your email.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the question that came up wasn't so much with the timers, but they came on at a very, very late hour of the night. And normally, when you observe that, you let people know. So I was glad that the person did email me. I forwarded it to you, Stan, and you can be checking it out. So I think we just need to be able to say, when are they actually going on, at what time, and then what floors are they going on? Because one of the things I noted is sometimes the one, and I can't remember, I think it's the third level, doesn't always go on at the same time. So it's just those kind of things. But people, it's good that people are watching it and they care enough to let us know what's going on.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, walking up the Pagoda Trail on Saturday with Matt, I noticed them at 11:30 in the morning. All floors were on.
Really? Okay.
Thankfully, they're LED.
Yeah.
but
Okay.
we are addressing it.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Stan, are there any other issues before we adjourn this evening that we need to cover? All right, well, thank you everyone for participating in this evening's meeting, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank